today, welcome to the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast, by the way, is we are going to go through our first Dynasty Rookie Big Board of 2026. We got this pulled up here. It's just our spreadsheet for now, but at the time of us posting it, it's going to be available on our website, anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com. I'm your host, Andrew. I am one of the co-authors of this big board alongside my partner here at Angle, Mitchell. How are you today, dude? You ready to talk about some rookies or future rookies?
Yeah, man, this is going to be a very exciting class, and it's not very often where three prospects are in contention to go number one. So if you have a top pick, don't trade it because, these three guys that we're about to dive into are franchise altering. So very excited time for all dynasty owners, especially if you are tanking because this crop of rookies are amazing, especially in the top five.
Very good. All right. So again, for context, this is a dynasty, so fantasy basketball focused rookie rankings here, and this is from a 9 category perspective. So this is probably different from points leagues, and obviously is not reflective of what we think will happen in the real life draft. So there are some players that Mitchell and I are in pretty heavy consensus on, others where we disagreed, and even their placement within here is still up for debate between us today. Obviously, this is the first version of the big board. There will be more coming soon, especially as we get further into the draft cycle. But we are in agreement on first overall, who we think is for Dynasty, Darryn Peterson. Mitchell, start us off. Why is Darryn Peterson number one for us?
I believe Darryn Peterson is number one for us because of how his skill set translates to the NBA. He's a very efficient shot maker. He has ideal height at 6'6". He also has length with a reported 6'10" wingspan. So he's someone who can really get his shot off really quick, and he's efficient, and he's a great finisher as well, posting up splits at 50, 40, and 80, something that you'd like to see for especially a high volume scorer. And with Darryn Peterson, a lot of what we're seeing is on a very limited sample size in terms of games, but also in minutes. He's has a lingering hamstring injury that he's been dealing with, where I think it's hamstring. It's either hamstring or calf, but he's been dealing with throughout the season where he's only really averaging 26 minutes per game. But despite that, he's honestly averaging great numbers at 21.6 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1 steal, and zero point 0.7 blocks. So, Andrew, with Darryn Peterson, I feel like he is probably the safest in terms of like a translatable like skill set in the NBA, which is kind of why we both agree to have him here at number one. Uh, do you have any final thoughts on Darryn Peterson before we go into Cam Boozer?
I mean, there's a lot of things about him that are special. The jumbo size for the point guard position. I know he doesn't produce the assists that we would like for a point guard, but I think in a system where he is more of the main focus, those will probably go up a little bit. Maybe he's not, a 7, 8 per assist per game type of point guard, but I wouldn't fully rule that out for him. So uh, with the clean percentages, probably position size, probably the safest bet to land the biggest role early, because he's probably going to get drafted number one overall to a team who needs him at whatever position he's going to be at. So really like this one. Hopefully he can have a pretty clean rookie year percentage wise, because obviously it is very difficult to play point guard in the NBA, especially for rookies. So let's move on to number two. So this is where our first debate just started at. Who is going to go 2 and 3? Initially, I said Cam Boozer at 2. You said I said Cam Boozer at 2. You said AJ Dybantsa at 2. And before this list was official, we had Dybantsa at 2. I ended up settling for that one, Boozer at 3. Recently, you changed your mind to come around on putting Cam Boozer at 2. So going along with me on this one. So Cam Boozer, power forward at Duke. I initially picked him for number 2 because I would think like even potentially even more so than Darryn Peterson. Probably the most fantasy friendly game of what we're looking at
Mhm.
from this crop of rookies for 2026. Does everything: the scoring, the rebounding, assists, great steals numbers for a power forward, excellent steals numbers, high shot attempt volume. He takes and makes threes, 37% from the field on threes, and 75% from the line at high volume. I would love to see that get a little bit better, but that's not like detrimental bad in regards to free throw percentage. It's fine, especially if he's going to shoot 57% from the floor. So this is somebody from a volume basis, could be one of the most productive, or probably will be maybe one of the most productive rookies from this class. The one thing that gave us pause, or maybe you pause initially, Mitch, this is more talking about real life outlook for him. The reason why you said three for him initially is you're worried about his size and position, maybe being a little bit of a tweener. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to imagine him being kind of the Vulcan of the offense as, let's be honest, if he's plays as a center, he's undersized, but as a power forward, you kind of want that verticality and the quickness to guard like someone like a Giannis Antetokounmpo, especially, you know, those star level talents at the four position. So while I do think he's incredibly skilled, there is reason for concern where it may not totally translate. And Andrew, to your point, if we're looking at straight up category stat set and or standard nine category leagues, he probably is number one. And I even thought of potentially jumping him over Darryn Peterson, but it's just the physical concerns of where like he's most of his production is through bully ball and him just being more powerful and physically stronger than some of these college kids that he's playing up against. But when he goes up against NBA level athletes, who's to say it won't translate? I'm still confident that it will, but Peterson is just a little bit safer, and we already know what we're getting with him in terms of like what a real role would look like. So like with Darryn Peterson, we could see him as really like a combo guard like Anthony Edwards, where he can peak at like a 27, 28 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists with some pretty solid steal numbers. But with Cam Boozer, maybe the athleticism doesn't fully translate. I think it will, but it's just that finding that balance, and I think Boozer is that number two prospect for us because he does have that safe floor, but you know, Peterson is just still a different type of athlete that you can't bet against.
Yeah. So just to kind of put into perspective, if obviously things go super well for Cameron Boozer, what this nine category out production might look like. January 24th against Wake Forest. 32 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 7 for 7 from the free throw line, 3 for 8 from downtown. Incredible line. Incredible line right there. So the potential to, again, be one of the most productive players from a fantasy basketball perspective once he does eventually get drafted, which, again, like we mentioned, could end up being number one overall in real life and in dynasty leagues as well. This is obviously our first big board. Things might potentially change here. But let's now move down to number three. Obviously, Mitch, maybe we can consider 2 and 3, or maybe even all 1, 2, and 3 could all potentially change around at the towards the end here. But for now, we have AJ Dybantsa at 3. There's no real question of tweener status. He's going to be a wing. He's 6'9", perfect size for it, athletic, great. So that part is solved. He doesn't have that issue like Boozer does. With AJ Dybantsa, obviously we would like some of these shooting statistics to be a little bit better. 31% from three, 76% from the line. He does still shoot 53% from the field, which is awesome. He's playing a different style than somebody like a Boozer is. It's not bully ball. I mean, to Boozer's credit, I mean, he is listed as 250 in weight on the website I'm currently looking at. Maybe that's true. That's like grown man size. We'll see. Whereas Dybantsa is kind of more of the body type you'd expect, 6'9", 210 of one of these prototypical wings, but someone who's not just a 3-and-D guy with a ton of scoring punch, 23 points per night. His last 2 games, well, he had on the 24th against Utah, he had 43 points. This was that night where multiple guys we're going to talk about in this list today, because this is a very good draft class, had 30 or more points in the same night. So he had 43 on the 24th. And then his most recent game against Arizona, he had 24 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists. So he is a productive player across the board. And again, there is no question on his what his role is potentially going to be. Mitch, what would you like to see a little bit more of out of AJ Dybantsa? Is maybe just the lack of as much volume as somebody like Cameron Boozer puts out, possibly the reason why you have settled with him at number 3 for now?
Yeah, with AJ, he's that prototypical Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum type two-way wing where you really build your franchise around. And what I enjoy about Dybantsa is one, before going on what I'd like to see him improve on, is that he is great at drawing fouls. And drawing fouls is a key indicator of being a star and a focal point as a primary initiator for an offense. So if you look at his game log, he has games where he's drawing, 16 free throws, 12 free throws, 20 free throws, 10 free throws, multiple games where he's drawing double digits at the foul line. He plays that herky jerky style like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He loves the pump fakes. He's great with the footwork. However, to your point, Andrew, to answer the question that you had for me, I'd love to see him improve in his free throw shooting, especially if he's shooting at the volume and rate that he's getting to the line. If he's only at 75, 76% with 10 free throws or 8 free throws or 7 free throws a game, right? You're more than likely to hurt your overall team's percentages with that volume. So that's the number one area of concern, even though it is something that is encouraging, right? Getting to the line a lot is an indicator that you are going to be a primary option in the NBA, especially if they draft you with the top three pick. But if he's dragging you down in terms of percentages, like at RJ Barrett, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Would you say, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, at least from the field, 53% on decent volume is fine for now. We'll see if that'll still translate and hold with the NBA. Like someone like Boozer plays a lot closer to the rim, at least a little bit more often. So I'd expect his field goal percentage to remain relatively high, where Debance is going to be spaced out a lot more in his role, most likely. So we'll see if that holds, but he is good at getting to the rim, like you said. So it still should be up there. I'm not expecting it to like plummet from now to the NBA, but of course, there's going to be a learning curve adjusting to NBA speed, athleticism, size, all that. But there's a reason why all three of these guys are in tier one together. It's really hard to choose. Like if both Boozer and Dybantsa could be number 2 for us, I think that's what we would do. They could just share it. So they're there for now. But this classes are at the top here is maybe a little interchangeable. I mean, we both agreed on Darryn at 1 for now, but it is really tough between Boozer and Dybantsa here. So obviously, if you prefer Dybantsa at 2 over Boozer, you are not wrong, and you are also not wrong if you prefer Boozer there too. It's very much up in the air right now, and we'll see how the rest of this season progresses for them, especially once they get on, the national spotlight for the upcoming March Madness. So let's get down now to
Wait,
tier
Andrew,
2.
before we
Go
move
ahead.
on, just a quick little thought exercise for everyone wondering where the value is for the top three. Andrew, would you say all three are worth taking in the first round in terms of a 30-team league that we're accustomed to?
Yeah, this is going to be the top 3. Very likely. I don't
No, I mean in terms of like overall dynasty value, are they top 30 assets in a
top
startup?
30. Oh, they're going to be close. I mean, maybe one or two of them will be. They'll be close for sure. Top 40, 45. It's kind of hard to place them right now off the top of my head without looking at a dynasty sheet.
Wait,
Um,
where
I mean,
would you
you
put
could
that? Where
safely
would you
say
value
top
the number
45.
one? Where would you put the number one pick, I guess, if you had it? Like, where would you value 1.01? Like,
Mm,
you had your pick of the litter between the three,
top 30.
top 30. So
Yeah.
you would take like an Alex Star over all three? I feel like top 20, I think is
Maybe
where
we do have to bump that up then. I don't know. Alex Sard is doing really well right now, but that's a great person to bring up who's up in
around the
that
same age,
range.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, dude, this
Maybe it does need to be closer to top 20. We'll see. Well, at least yeah, because you're right about in the point of it being 1.01, which means you have your selection of the three. It's not,
hmm
the third selection where two of them are already gone, which is a different story. So you safely have pick one. You get your selection of the three at this time on, draft day for dynasty leagues. Then maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll go in the middle. Let's say top 25, probably.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree, Andrew.
All right. So good thought exercise. Thank you for that, Mitch. Let's go down now to tier two. So obviously this is a pretty clear tier break here. Not a huge one, but it is one for sure. And let's start at the top of it with fourth overall, Caleb Wilson. This is another power forward, 6'10", so a little bit bigger than Boozer lengthwise. He probably does not weigh more than him, I would imagine. Boozer's kind of built like a tank. Nah, yeah, definitely. Boozer's got a bit more weight on Wilson, but Wilson does have this great rebounding rate that you'd love to see from somebody of his size. Pretty good with his assists as well. And then the stocks numbers are a bit more potent. This is probably the most potent stocks numbers so far out of this top five. Maybe things will change once we start talking about number five, Mitch. But for right now, at least combined in per game averages in the NCAA right now, he's at 3 stocks a night. So 1.4 blocks and 1.6 steals. So very productive on that end. He is averaging a double double, 19 and 10 with 2.8 assists. So little out of position assists there for a power forward. A lot of people do like Caleb Wilson. Obviously, you want to see him if he's going to be this type of player and be close to the basket a lot. Then we're going to want to see some size put on. Right now, he's only estimated like 215 ish, 220 ish. If he weighed closer to what Cameron Boozer weighed, then that'd be very promising if he'd still be able to move like that and everything. Because he's only attempting 1 3 per game, 25% on those. And he does get to the line a lot, 7 attempts a night, but he is shooting a little below 70% from there. So the efficiency concerns are there from a shooting perspective, but obviously, if he is going to be closer to the rim majority of the time, then maybe he'll be looked upon as a nice boost to the field goal percentage, maybe not so much to free throw percentage, typical big man type of statistics. Mitchell, how do you feel about Caleb Wilson?
I feel pretty good with Caleb Wilson. I know that North Carolina is playing him like a Giannis, where he's the focal point of the offense, he's crashing the boards, he's very disruptive on defense. I guess when you think about like in terms of production, he's up there with the tier one. It's just that where he's in a weird spot where like he is, I guess he's not the shooter of Cam Boozer where he can stretch the floor and those front court positions. And can you really invest a top five pick on a player like that who is a non-shooting threat? However, if you look at him as like a jumbo Tari Eason, that's pretty appealing, right? Someone who has a very high motor, someone who gets a lot of stocks, steals block numbers, and crashes the boards, right? If he's that Energizer Bunny, that's still a top 50 asset just because he has that exercise that like a Tari Eason or a Ron Holland doesn't have. And at least that gives them a little bit more agency when you're a non-shooting threat. And with Caleb Wilson, he gives you all the production you want. It's just the question of like what's his offensive role if the offense isn't being built around him, if you're a lottery team selecting him. So, Andrew, similar concerns there for you with Wilson?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from a lottery team, there are some lottery teams out there who are definitely lacking within the front court. So if they decide that they're going to build a system involved around, Caleb Wilson attacking the rim a bunch, Maybe that's the direction someplace could go. So I won't fully rule it out. Like I'm not feeling terrible if I am picking fourth upcoming here for Dynasty draft. Caleb Wilson is probably going to be pretty good, but definitely a little, a step below the top three, which is why we have him in tier two here. So the concerns are definitely valid from you, Mitch. For sure, understandable. But you do like the size, athleticism. There's a lot to like here too. So definitely don't feel down on Caleb Wilson. That stat set, like you said, is a little Giannis-esque at the moment. It's honestly does. The more I look at it, it does look pretty similar. The high scoring, rebounding, little assists, stocks, not really a threat from three, and then does get to the line a lot and isn't terrific from there, but he is good from the field in general. So he does have that. It is appealing. We'll see if that fully carries through because obviously Giannis is a very, very unique player. Let's go now
Mhm.
to the second member of tier two. So this is kind of like we were pretty set on, this is the top three, and then we were both in agreement. Caleb Wilson's on number four. We were both in agreement on who we put at five, but it was like, we knew who the top four was. Now let's kind of do a little bit more digging to figure out who we want at five now. Kingston Flemings from Houston is who we settled on. So when we talked about Darryn Peterson first, not your prototypical point guard. He's, more of a unique type of
Combo
player.
guard,
Think more
right?
like like an Anthony Edwards. Kingston Flemings is a true point guard. But high usage role and obviously plays in a great system for a great coach. Houston players are, lately working out pretty well. 6'4", so he's not one of those undersized, 6'1", 6'2" college point guards. He does have a little bit of size on him. 17 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. So most assists so far that we've discussed today, 2 steals a night. Prototypical point guard production. You want those assists and steals. However, he also very efficient performance from a shooting perspective. 52% from the field, 39% from three, 80% from the line. He does not get to the line a ton, unfortunately, but it's at a moderate amount. It's not like shockingly low or anything, but he is converting from there at 80%. So basically, you can consider him 50, 40, 80 club for that shooting splits there. But a bit more than average for what you see with like NCAA true point guards. They usually are more so like, 12, 13 points per night. So we're getting a little bit of an elevated scoring load from Flemings here at 17 a night. And then you love to see just those, the typical assists and steals as part of the just 9 category stat set. So we really like what we see from Flemings due to his size, athleticism, a very, very smart player. Again, they make pretty smart players coming out of Houston lately. We don't have concerns about him, being a defensive liability in the NBA, getting played off the floor. This is someone who might potentially on where he gets drafted might play a lot right away because this is one of the more like high IQ guys I would say that we're getting to here, and that's something that you and I specifically here at Angle Mitch really do value a lot is basketball IQ, and Kingston Flemings is a great representation of that. Anything you'd like to add on Flemings here before we start to move on?
Yeah, very quick shout out that Kingston Flemings is able to play a very prominent role for, Ralph Sampson, who's known to really lean heavy on his upperclassmen. For example, like LJ Cryer last year. Before that, it was Jamal Shed. These are players who played NCAA basketball for 4+ years, and now he's really handing the keys to Kingston Flemings, a young point guard, but really showing improving his worth for a highly ranked Houston Cougars team. And when I think of Kingston Flemings, I see a very supercharged Cason Wallace. Someone who is a disruptive defender, but he also has that offensive pop that you'd like to see when you are taking a risk or a flyer with a top 5 pick. This is a pick that has high risk, high reward, especially when you're not in that top 3, right? You want someone a little bit more secure. And, when you think of top 5 picks, it's more like the consolation prize from those really gemstone talents. But Kingston Flemings here at 5 is a great one to have. He's someone that you can project very well into the NBA given his size, like you said, Andrew, but also those clean percentages that you like to see. And then let's go on to tier three, this is where there's like a little bit of a drop off. I'd say like with Caleb Wilson, Kingston Flemings, we probably project them around like top 50 in a startup, maybe the second half of the second round in a 30 team league. But with tier three, it's a little bit more open to interpretation. And then Keaton Wagler here is going to go ahead and kick us off. Andrew, I know this is someone you're really high on, so why don't you introduce our community to Keaton Wagler?
Ogler, yes. So, this is when we were putting this board together, you and I. When I was looking through who we want next at number six, because we feel really good about the top five. I love how you broke that down. Like top five's pretty set in here, and then once you get to tier three onwards, it's much more open for interpretation, in our opinion. Top five looks really good though for this draft, so you tankers should feel pretty good, even if you don't land in that top three. Top five is really, really nice so far. But on to Wagler. This is somebody who could emerge as kind of like the hero outside of that top five, in my opinion. Still on the younger side, he is a true freshman, 6'6" shooting guard. Now, when we were putting this together, what was it, like a week or two ago? At least the beginning portion of this, we worked over it like the last like couple of weeks or so, deciding who's going to go where, putting the whole like spreadsheet together and everything. And I realized looking at some stat sets of guys that were projected to maybe be first rounders, something along those lines. I come across Wagler and I go, okay, Illinois does have a lot of recent transfers, the Ivisic brothers, Andrej Stojakovic, upperclassmen playing for this program. They are currently, I think they were most recently ranked number 11 and a big win recently, which I will talk about in a moment. They're probably going to be a top 10 team now. But they have this freshman on their team who has an NBA size at 6'6", putting up 17, 5, and 4. So I looked at it as like, okay, this is one of those big size pass, dribble, shoot, kind of combo guards here. That's great. He shoots 43% from three-point range so far, and 47% from the field, 82% from the line, and he's getting to the line around 5 times a night. So this is just something that's come out of nowhere. I think you mentioned to me, Mitch, he was a three-star recruit coming into this year. And like I alluded to earlier, Illinois did bring in some transfers, some new upperclassmen. So they were obviously planning on some other guys to play. But Wagler has really emerged here as one of their primary players. And I know his usage isn't high all the time, but it's starting to tick up recently. Obviously, this will be encapsulated by his most recent performance on Purdue. Like I mentioned on January 24th, multiple guys we're going to talk about today. Actually, Kingston Flemings was one of those too, put up 30 or more points in the same night. The other member of that is Keaton here. He had 46 points on the road against Purdue, set a record for the highest scoring performance in the Purdue Stadium. So 11 for 13 from the free throw line, 9 for 11 from three. I know obviously that part's ridiculous. That's not super sustainable, but still someone who's capable of going off like this. He's got a 23-point game, 22-point game. So 23 points against Nebraska, 22 points against Missouri, 22 points against Northwestern. Only what, like 3 single-digit games that I'm noticing so far. So awesome stuff to see from him. The potential is really there with that size, with this ability that he has, the scoring potential. A lot to like from a real life and of course a fantasy perspective. Someone I'd be very excited about for Dynasty here. All right, so Mitchell, I know when we were discussing this list, we had our top five figured out. And I think you were liking this next guy as potentially at number six. Well, I know we, of course, ended up agreeing on Wagler. The 46-point performance had to push you over the edge. So thank you for coming around on that one. But now we have your guy that you wanted to put pretty up here. And I am in agreement with this one. The nine category game does look very clean. Darius, is it Asuf or Acuff? One of those two.
Acuff.
Acuff, thank you. Darius Acuff Jr. Playing for Arkansas, 6'3", so not too undersized from the point guard position. Mitchell, fill us in here. Why do you like Acuff so much?
I love his confidence and really his demeanor and how he plays. He reminds me a lot of one of your favorites from back in the day when we were in college, Colin Sexton. This guy
Okay.
has young bull energy. He's very brazen in his approach. He's very confident. he can shoot the ball very efficiently, similar to Colin Sexton in his prime. What I think differentiates himself is that he's a little bit of a better perimeter shooter, which gives me a better outlook or confidence in his NBA outlook than, let's say, a Colin Sexton, who, by the way, Colin Sexton is a 20 point per game scorer for at least like 3 years during his days in Cleveland. So, uh, Darius Acuff is a player that is really exciting, and he just is a dog, man. I mean, you know, he's averaging 20 points a game, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, zero point 0.9 steals on 50, 40, and 78%. So pretty clean percentages. He's similar in terms of a stat line to like Kingston Fleming's with a little bit of dip and steals, which, everyone loves stocks, right? So if you're willing to tear down a little, Darius Acuff is a pretty nice consolation prize with a similar profile. With Acuff, though, I think just his demeanor will take him a long way and like his willingness to improve, someone who takes the game very seriously. And that's something that I look into when evaluating draft prospects and longevity in the league is their approach to their game. Are they willing to get better? Are they willing to reflect? And Acuff seems to me, based on some of his interviews, to be that type of guy moving forward. Okay, so another point guard here next is Mikal Brown. So this is someone you were pretty high on too, and this was who everyone thought should have been the MVP in, the Team USA under 19 or under 20 team. 19 and under, I think, last year, over AJ Dybantsa. He didn't receive that, AJ did, but Mikal Brown generated a ton of hype for this draft class and was seen as that number 4 guy before Caleb Wilson really took on the reins on that tier list of his own with Kingston Flemings. Mikal Brown still has a lot of hype, and we just haven't seen those percentages improve this year. I know there's a lot of talk about him having nagging injuries throughout the college season, but in terms of like being 6'5", who can theoretically stretch the floor and play make for his team, who has pretty solid length as a point guard, that's something that you like to see uh, in terms of a player profile. But Andrew, at some point we got to look at the percentages, and I know we already probably dropped him from the start of the process to right here at 8. He was seen
Mhm.
as 4 at one point. You know, how how much are we still like weighing on that Team USA performance for Mikal Brown before we kind of say, hey, like maybe the percentages aren't going to get better. He's not the shooter that we thought he's going to progress as, you know. Just overall thoughts on those efficiency splits for Mikal Brown.
I mean, we're kind of hanging on just like some other NBA draft boards are hanging on for Mikal Brown. I'm seeing him quite often in, still in like top 10, top 8, top 7 projections or big boards for different draft analysts out there. So we've, have him in a similar range here because there at least theoretically what we're looking at should be a pretty good player. And to allude to what you said earlier, and to Brown's credit, it could be due to lingering injuries, causing some issues from him, just playing from a playing perspective this year. 27% from three, 37% from the floor is obviously pretty ugly. And the turnovers are kind of up there too. So if there could just be all around efficiency issues, he's at least at 82% from the free throw line. And obviously that's something that we want to closely look at, for shooting relevancy in the NBA moving forward. So the size, athleticism, and like scoring profile is there. There's people who still believe in him at the moment. But if this continues, I will not be shocked if he falls down NBA draft boards as well as our big board, just due to that. So we'll kind of keep a close eye here on Brown. He's going to stay in the bottom of tier 3 for now because I know that he's very like going to at least initially, is a pretty highly sought after prospect by NBA teams. Just needs to maybe find a nice run of consistency and health this season with Louisville. So now, Mitch, let's move on to tier four here. This is someone you were very insistent upon putting in the top 10. It took us a little bit to find the right spot for him, but I think we have found it here. So this is one of our first. I think maybe Mikael Brown was, I don't know if he was held back or something, because I think this is our first upperclassman that we're discussing today. Yeah, because Mikael was in uh the last, like, he was number 8 in the 2025 recruiting class. So I think he's just a little
Yeah.
bit older, just due to his birthday, something along those lines. But Carr is our first upperclassman we are discussing today. 6'5" wing, shooting guard, small forward. At Baylor right now, Carr is actually kind of one of their featured players for the offense so far. So this is could be one of those players from a dynasty perspective. That's what we need to focus on here, because in the real NBA draft, he might go like 20th or something like that. However, teams picking in the 20s are usually good teams. Good teams who have high paid players because they're good teams like to get these nice cheap contributors towards the end of the first round. Some of these upperclassmen who could contribute immediately. Jaime Jaquez on Miami, Brandon Pazimski on Golden State. Cameron Carr could be that next one, getting drafted by a winning team who plans on using him immediately. 20 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists a night for Baylor, 41% from three. Mitch, I'll let you take it from here. Why do you like Cameron Carr so much?
Man, his physical profile is just too good to pass up on. 6'5", 7'2" wingspan. Who was 6'5" in last draft cycle with a 7'2" wingspan, who is also an upperclassman. That's Cedric Howard. Cameron Carr is also very efficient, has good block. I think, yeah, he has a pretty solid block
1.4.
rate too.
Mm.
Pretty decent steals, but as you know, steals fluctuate. And, having a 7'2" wingspan doesn't hurt. It's always gonna come a little bit more natural to those who have long wingspans in terms of like stock accumulation. So with Cameron Carr, if you have the stocks, you have the physical profile, and you have the shooting to back up, man, I mean, that's the type of player that you just have to take in really the top 10 no matter what, right? And he's still a pretty young junior in all things considered. Like we'll see with like Yaxel Lindeberg, who's like a super senior who's going to be 25 on draft day. Cameron Carr is still only 21 years old. He's going to be, I think, like 22 when he hits his first day in the NBA, but he's a huge riser for this Baylor team. And you know what they say about Baylor guards. They just always translate into great NBA players, right? We have Keontae George. We also have Davion Mitchell. Jared Butler, he's good statistically, but he just never panned out. But in terms of like Baylor guards, you can't really bet against them. VJ Edgecombe. Cameron Carr is such a great like physical profile that I wouldn't want to pass up on him if you have like a mid to late lottery pick. Andrew, I mean, any last thoughts on Cameron Carr as our first upperclassman here? I know you mentioned like the Jalen Tyson comparison in terms of like
Oh,
upperclassmen willing to
yes.
contribute.
Mhm. Yes, that's another good example of somebody else who, these teams are planning for them to contribute right away as, a rotation player, where these guys picked in the late teens, early 20s are making, 2, $3 million. So a young player coming in, making around that much fits really well into a team's cap sheet. There's winning teams who plan on using these guys, and guys like Carr who go to winning teams who usually are teaching better habits, because they are expecting to win. They're not expecting to tank for more picks. Shout out to the Utah Jazz. Usually you see rookies develop really well in scenarios like that, and that could also be the case for our next guy here in tier four. So tier four is where our upperclassmen come in. This is our next upperclassman, and this will round out our top 10 here. We got four more after this one. But at number 10, LeBaron Philon Jr. from Alabama. Now, nothing special from the physical profile. We actually have combine measurements for Phelan. He did that last year. Um, It's only a 6'6" wingspan, 6'4" height. Nothing crazy from his max vertical, agility shuttle, anything along those lines. But there is a talented scorer in here with LeBaron. 22 points a night, 3 rebounds, 5 assists per night, 36% from deep, 52% from the floor. So he is one of Alabama's premier players. He is capable of some pretty explosive outings and just honestly really good scoring consistency. His last 4 games against Texas, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, 21 points, 32 points, 23 points, 26 points. Very, very rock solid right now for this Alabama team. Anything else you wanted to add on LeBaron, Mitch?
I think just a really quick shout out that his shooting has progressed while despite increasing his usage and his role for this Alabama team that's ranked currently in the top 25. Going from his freshman season where he shot 45% to now 52%. And then the big indicator here is his increase in 3-point percentage, where he was a net negative at 31%, but now he's a pretty respectable shooter at 36.6%. So something that you definitely like to see as a guard who is going to be playing in the perimeter. LeBaron Philon is a really great case of, why going back to school could help generate your draft value, where he was seen as like a maybe a 20s pick in, the last season. But now in this draft cycle, he's getting mid to late lottery discussion. So, this is a great case of why going back to school can really help your value as long as you improve on some of the things that the NBA scouts are looking for you to improve on.
Would agree, and I think we're going to see a lot more of guys staying in school. Like, unless you're those blue chip freshmen, like who we discussed in the top five, staying in school is a pretty attractive option as opposed like you're probably making more in school than you are in the G League. I'm sure it's a much better day-to-day experience, obviously staying in school, being, on campus and everything too. So I think these upperclassmen like Phelan and Carr, who are still only 21 or 20s, something around there, as opposed to someone like at the end of our list who's 23, well, that we will discuss. We're going to probably see a lot more of those 20, 21-year-olds in the top 10 just because of how lucrative it's going to start to be moving forward to remain in the NCAA, especially if you're playing for a program like Phelan. He's at Alabama. Carr is at Baylor. I'm sure both of those schools could pay quite well. Okay, now this is kind of where things get fun and even more open to interpretation because we really like where the top 10 is at. Maybe we'll see if Brown Jr. stays in there with the last part of the lottery here. For starters, there's really this is not the year for like if you're a tanker and you're like, man, I really hope I land a center this year. In our opinion, this is not the year for that. Unless you consider Boozer to be a big, you're not probably going to find a great big like with like top 10 value this year. We don't see it so far. There is some in the lottery, which is kind of all that we're about to discuss on the tail end of the lottery here, but no like premier talent. This is the must-have big of the year, and we'll
Our
talk
first
about
center is at 11, right? I
right.
mean,
Exactly. It's not the year for bigs. This is a great point guard year. You can get a great guard or combo guard or point guard this year. This is a great year for that. But it's not the year for centers this year, which is fine. This is kind of just what naturally happens with the draft cycle. But the first guy we're going to discuss in tier five is a true or kind of a true center. Uh, maybe he could play power forward because he can stretch the floor. And we'll see how that role goes in the NBA. But he is playing center, or actually, it looks like he's playing power forward for Washington, and that's Hannes Steinbeck. So Steinbeck is a premier scorer for a big man. 17 points, 11 rebounds, and a little bit of passing, 1.8 assists. And then basically he's at the triple. Well, no, not at the triple one, but he is at 1 block and 1 steal. 3-point shot is somewhat coming around 32% from the field. He's only attempting like one or two of those a night. And then he is getting to the line around 5 times, or getting 5 attempts per game, I should say, around 75%. So this is kind of one of those potentially stretch bigs, but he does have the ability to play close to the basket too. Obviously, the field goal percentage does still look good, but it leaves a lot of hope for his future NBA role. He has the size, the rebounding, and it looks like he's got this offensive scoring profile. So obviously, if he can add more distance shooting to that, then this is something who can translate really well for an NBA team as well as for fantasy basketball. Because if he is going to produce this much at points and rebounds, and then as you know, out of position with either forward center eligibility, starting to add in those threes and blocks to his profile too. And this is someone who could bring a lot of value to your team. I know he made a lot of noise for Team Germany in their recent, what was it, the under, it's either under 19 or under 21 FIBA team. He had a big performance with them. So a lot to like here about Steinbach. Mitch, is there anything you wanted to add on him?
Very reminiscent of Kyle Filipowski in his profile, another guy who we had in our like top 15, top 16 when we reviewed the 2024 big board, despite him going outside of the first round in the real NBA draft. But, a lot of that could have been because of the story circulating that he was dating his babysitter. So, a lot of things pushed him back outside of the game of basketball. But Hans, very reminiscent of Kyle Filipowski and what his role could look like in the NBA. So, if you're a fan of Flip, Hans could be a great guy that replicates similar production, who we think is pretty valuable in terms of like a top 150 dynasty asset. So, unfortunately, this draft is not heavy on centers. He may not even get center eligibility, like you said, Andrew, in Fantrax. So, like this potentially being the first center on the board, it's not the year for you. That was 2025 and 2024, where there's centers everywhere in the lottery. But if you're looking for one, this is probably your best bet. I mean, outside of Cameron Boozer. Talking about centers, we'll go on to the next one, who I'm a pretty big fan of, in Adai Mara, who was seen as a premier lottery talent going as far back as 2024. But Andrew, as you know, we follow UCLA basketball from time to time. Mick Cronin does not play underclassmen. He relies very heavily on his upperclassmen. We've seen it with various different high five-star recruits with like Peyton Watson coming off the bench, Amari Bailey, another five-star player coming off the bench. He simply does not play them. You have to gain his trust and you have to put in the time. So Adai Mara said, screw that. I'm going to go to Michigan where Dusty May knows how to play big man, with Vlad Golden, Danny Wolf. Adai Mara fits right in. He's 7'3". He's 21 years old, still younger on as a junior. But the real appeal with Adai Mara are his blocks, right? And he has pretty good post footwork, solid assists, and with Adai Mara, it's pretty similar to like a Donovan Clingan and the type of production that you're going to get. He may not be that player who plays 30 minutes per game in an NBA floor. He does have conditioning issues. But in terms of per minute production, you're going to get the rebounds, you're going to get the blocks, and you're going to get those out of position assists from time to time. And that's something that's very worth considering taking in the top 14. So Adai Mara might even raise in the top 10 in the next update if he continues this because, Michigan is very good. And part of the reason for that is Adai Mara. Andrew, any additional thoughts on what could be really the first center off the board here? I mean, I guess outside of Hans, who arguably is a center.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you for properly pronouncing Han's first name. I called him Hannes, which is probably made me sound like an idiot. So sorry about that. But
That's like a
moving on
Finnish
to
name.
Mara. Moving on to Mara. Yeah, you are right that this is probably someone who will have that center eligibility. This is more of a true center here. And I had questions when you first brought up like, hey, I need Mara in this lottery, because I immediately thought back to the UCLA days. So it's almost like that leaves kind of a sour taste in the mouth. But he is looking really good in Michigan right now. We'll see I mean, the scoring profile obviously isn't like great, but you're more so getting him as kind of like a defensive play because, like you did mention, the 2.7 blocks per night is great. He is not bad at passing either. The rebounding could get a little bit better too, but if this is going to be a draft where you do need a center, I mean, if you're trying to like trade, I don't even know if I'd recommend trading backwards just to get a center. I mean, you just got to go with the best available, and if you're in the top 10, it's most likely going to be a guard. But if you're outside the top 10, you can get at least a maybe reliable source of blocks with Mara here. So not too old for an upperclassman. He's 21. So not a huge concern there. And I do like to see the bounce back with Michigan. There's just parts of his game that worry me a tiny bit, but the size is there. And this is another situation of somebody who, despite him being in at 12 for us right now, on NBA draft day, he's probably going to be somewhere in the 20s would be our guess. So this could be another potential winning team who, let's say, instead of using the free agent market to get a backup center, they use their first round pick. And now Mara is playing, almost immediately put into backup center minutes with an NBA team next year. That's something that we would obviously love to see. Okay, the next player. Obviously, his placement might be controversial, but again, just of course, another reminder that this is for fantasy basketball because we are well aware that Nate Ament is within mock drafts and big boards ranked pretty high for a lot of people, within the top seven. From a category perspective, we don't like it that much. 16.6 rebounds, 2 assists per night. Okay. 1.3 steals. Okay. 42% from the field, 29% from the three, 76% from the line with a pretty ugly shooting stroke at the moment. I mean, Mitch, do we see any type of insane athleticism to make up for this? Or are there some red flags with Nate Ament that have us quite worried here?
I think there's a lot of red flags. This really reminds me of like a Zachary Risacher. He's a
I know you
shooter
said Cody
who,
Williams in a tweet as well.
yeah, Cody Williams too. I mean, like Nate Ahmet is like a shooter who can't shoot, and like theoretically, yeah, he moves well for his size, but he doesn't have the on-ball skills to play on the perimeter, but he's not strong enough to play in the post. So if you're not going to be shooting well, or if you're not going to be banging bodies, right, in the post, what's your long-term role in the NBA? And with Nate Amit, sure, if everything clicks, he could be definitely a top 100 fantasy asset. But, the shooting raises a lot of red flags. And if you're not going to be good at one thing and you're going to be mediocre in a lot of things while having those efficiency issues, I'm not too confident in him as a fantasy basketball producer. I know there was a lot of buzz on him being in the top five. Lately, that's been fallen. Sometimes I even see him outside of the lottery in a lot of mock drafts. Uh, I mean, does that like am I over exaggerating here on some of the concerns? Because if you're 6'10 and shooting 42% from the field and less than 30% from three as a perimeter slash big wing, I mean, what's the peak here and like what's the floor? Because I feel like the floor is very low, even if the ceiling is high.
Right. I mean, you can obviously argue that he's on our list still due to the current hype that he still has. We're making this in late January, so there's obviously plenty of time to turn this around because the time where this is all going to become most relevant is when he gets drafted in June. So we will see with Nate Ament because I mean, like I said, I think the hype is kind of the main reason why he's still in this list for us. There is physical tools that he is blessed with, but the just what we're seeing on court is just not convincing enough at the moment. There is a lot of red flags. There is, like you mentioned, players that we have scouted and looked at before, where yes, there is a lot of physical tools there, but it didn't end up working out, at least so far. Like you mentioned with earlier, Zachary Risache, who was just with, College Park, the G League team. So yeah, a lot to be afraid about with Nate Ament. I know a lot of people do still like him, so we will continue to keep a quite a close eye on him. We still had to keep him at 13th because we couldn't justify putting, at least for now, if things continue to stay bad, then we're booting him out of the lottery. But it was hard to put a super senior above him. So we kept the super senior at the last part of our lottery. He was in junior college for 3 years, and then came in for his junior season in 2023, 2024. And yeah, now he's a super senior at Michigan. Yaxel Lendeberg, he is probably going to get drafted this year. And there is a lot of sites, big boards, places that like him as a first round pick. So we are in agreement with that, especially if he's going to a team who's, maybe we're picking somewhere in the middle teens here, early 20s again, where it potentially is a more winning team who would be interested in his services right away because he's more of a ready-made product. Then that can make Yaxel much more appealing from a dynasty perspective, especially if someone's looking for a bit more production right away from the rookie day draft as opposed to more of a draft and stash kind of guy. So Yaxel does have that nice stat profile. 14.7 rebounds, 3 assists, almost at 3 stocks a night, 1.4 blocks, and 1.5 steals. He can shoot a little bit, 32% from three. He does have kind of like that more like power forward profile, but we do have combine measurements for Yaxel. 7'4" wingspan, despite his 6'9" height. 9 foot standing reach. Not a great max vertical, actually. So Yaxel is someone that we like because of his basketball IQ, his ability to do a little bit of everything, and someone who might be a good stocks producer and his future role in the NBA, which we hope is going to be with a more win-focused team who's looking to maybe use his services in a bench role right away. Because if we're talking like a deeper dynasty league, that's pretty helpful to teams like ours. When you get somebody who's playing right away, or if you get really lucky and you get someone who plays right away in the second round, like a Will Richard. But we like that possibility for Yaxel. I mean, an NBA team taking him is probably doing that with that intention. We don't think Yaxel is going to actually be drafted in the real NBA lottery, but for now, this is where we have his value at for a dynasty perspective. Mitch, I know you like Yaxel a bit too. Anything you wanted to add on him?
Yeah, and I think the placement really is because of his stat set. We're really only bumping him down because of his age, but he's such a fantasy friendly contributor. Because, like you said, averaging over 3 stocks a game. Love to see that. Pretty good scorer, solid rebounder. Love to see that. Good assist for a power forward. Love to see that. It's only the age that's really holding Yaxel back. But I think it's also something that I should probably mention is that he could have been drafted in the first round of last season, but he chose to stay back, play for Michigan, where he has a chance for a national title, and make similar money, where he can only really help his draft stock, right? So, I think Yaxel is going to be a fantasy staple, despite his age. I'd still definitely consider him in the lottery for dynasty leagues just because of, he doesn't really hurt you in anywhere. He's a plus contributor in many different categories. So, Andrew, before we close this out, I'd like to shout out some guys that we didn't list, such as Tunde Yesufu of Baylor, Thomas Ha, Braylon Mullins from UConn, and Koa Pete, and lastly, Jaden Quintance from Kentucky. Any other guys
So
that I'm missing here that you like to mention?
you did not miss any of our notable omissions, especially the first three you mentioned, Ho, Tunde, and Mullins. Who knows? Big board volume two, they could easily be in there. These two notable omissions I wanted to bring up is Koa Pete and Jaden Quintance. Maybe we could talk a little bit about each of them. Let's focus on Pete really quickly first, because I think this one's a little more cut and dry, where we're going to maybe not, maybe make some Quaintance fans not so happy once we get to that part. But Pete, for right now, at Arizona, who are obviously doing great at the moment. 14 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Both of his stocks numbers are under 1, zero point 0.8 steals, zero point 0.7 blocks. So that's not great to see. 26% from three is also not great to see. So if like he is projected as a power forward, but he's a little undersized for a power forward. So you really would hope that there's a great like strength or athleticism profile to take over for that. And we're not seeing it at the moment. Like it would be, it would make more sense if this was like his size and everything. It would make more sense if he was more of a 3-and-D type of profile. And that's not what he does. He doesn't really shoot threes. He actually attempts less than one per game. And he shoots 61% from the free throw line. So shooting is obviously a concern here. Not a great rebounder, despite it appears he's quite around the rim quite a bit. So just some things that concern us, despite the fact that he's valued highly on NBA draft boards right now, at least for fantasy basketball. We are not seeing it too much. Anything to add on Koa really quickly, Mitch, before we move on to the last guy?
He's pretty much like a blue chip David Roddy, right? Like,
Okay.
like theoretically, he does a little bit of everything, like jack of all trades, master of none. And that's someone who's a little bit boring for fantasy leagues. All right, Jaden Quintance, a guy who played at University of Arizona, no, Arizona State last season as a 17-year-old and returning back as a sophomore for the University of Kentucky. He is someone in the mold of a true center rim protector, great block numbers in terms of block percentage. However, the statistical output hasn't translated from Arizona State over to Kentucky. Andrew, does this concern you where he's increasing the level of competition, but he hasn't made that next step in terms of production?
Well, I mean, he's only played 4 games at Kentucky. I believe he is injured. So they're just like really all we can focus on is the Arizona State production. But what you and I are worried about is like this is someone where we're looking way more at his physical tools. This is, someone who theoretically, like I've seen some articles say he could potentially be a perennial all defensive player, something along those lines, or a game-changing type of defender. And yeah, like that, obviously, we can't rule that out for, pretty much anybody, but with him, it's like we're worried about like a Kaman Malawach type of situation. Like if he's not going to be useful enough on offense and the defense doesn't really come around to be NBA level either, especially for somebody who is 6'9", who offers no shooting, like I'm pretty scared for his future NBA role. Like for example, like Ryan Dunn was the recent like defensive specialist draft pick who hasn't really amounted to a whole lot for the Phoenix Suns right now, but he at least has some type of shooting that he's added to his profile, whereas
Yeah.
Quayton's plays more like a big, like a center. So that's what has me really concerned for him is like unless he ends up being Ben Wallace, who's at the moment is a one of one player, then it's the profile seems useless to me at this point. Like that's like the best possible outcome is he becomes a Ben Wallace because that's what his size is leading to at the moment, and his play style is like more big-esque than wing-esque. So very concerning stuff here. I know obviously there's not a lot of games that he's played for Kentucky, but things aren't going super well for Kentucky at least this year anyway. So we'll keep a close eye on if he does come back or if he just continues to sit out. Then obviously the next time we might see him make some noise is the combine. Maybe you might hear some things of freakish measurements that this guy's putting up on the combine. We're probably not going to buy into that. Like, great for him if he does it, but that's not going to really concern us for just the output of production that we want to see for fantasy basketball, especially if we're worried about what role is he possibly going to play on the floor for a real NBA team. We're just not so sure what that's going to be. So two kind of I think more reasonable omissions there. Whereas, if you're upset about Mullins or Tunde not being on there, we get it. Maybe they will be on the next one. But this is our top 14 for now. Let us know how who you think should be in here, who you agree with so far. If you're just excited about the college basketball season this year, what you think of the 2026 draft class. We are on the road to 500 subscribers. Please subscribe if you are new to the channel. Helps us out a ton. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and we will see you next time.